So I give what is chiefly a existential testimony, which is to say, in contradistinction to biographical um, information. By existential, I understand, let us say, truth as veracity, which is to say that someone, as Socrates sometimes compels his more amenable uh, interlocutors to do, to speak that which they uh, genuinely do hold to be so, to say their actual view, their actual opinion. So this is called sometimes truth as veracity, but there in the tradition, truth as veracity, in contradistinction to logical truth, where truth is tied to the logos, or ontological truth, where truth is tied to God or being, God, the philosopher's God, let's say, which, however, I'll add as in a parentheses, the philosopher's God is only so far as Leo Strauss's teaching goes, and I think so far as the truth also understood in the West in the light of the God of the believer, so the Hebrew God, and also the God of Thomas, in the sense that Thomas has both faith and reason. So this truth as veracity, standing in for existential truth, the way I understand that is that we're not dealing with an adequatio here. So it's not that some person, Thrasymachus, for instance, attests that they genuinely see the sense of and the support of and the cogency, um, the strength and the even the self-evidence of a certain opinion. For instance, that law is whatever the powerful say it is, sheer positive law in the ancient context in the debate in the polity or republic. Um, that would be the suke setting forth what the logos within the suke, quote unquote, thinks. So, like, it would regard thinking as sort of what we tell ourselves within our, silently within ourselves. If that's what thinking is, then truth as veracity in the sense of adequatio is that which is there within the suke or the soul is reproduced in the speech which you give to hand over to another. Um, so the existential truth differs from this in the sense that we don't have the theory of a suke. So, like, because, and so this is what I wanted to speak about, which is that just to give a sort of testimony of a Dasein, let's say, um, which is always moving between sort of the adventurous or the that which breaks from the normal, which perhaps in its highest or most exalted form is the Eigentliche or the Eigenlichkeit, the authenticity, but in its lower form is the group mind or das Mind, but only just as if somebody goes to, say, the Burning Man or something along those lines. It's an adventure because it stands in contradistinction to the blanched, predictable routine. So, in a parentheses, allow me to give sort of a difficulty which occurs to the modern mind, which didn't occur to the tradition, which comes out in Zizek. Zizek says that Trump is funnier than Alec Baldwin or whoever tries to um, do a lampoon of him. So the idea seems to be something along the lines of, like, usually reality is kind of predictable, banal, And and for this reason, the Lampoon or the Saturday Night Live monologue or whatnot can come in and they can put a wrench into that, and the work start acting up, and it draws everyone's attention to it, and maybe the machine breaks down and so on. So when you have a case of parody, the parodic, in the usual cases, it has something which sort of explodes a little squib or tiny firework or so, in contradistinction to the bland, shadowy, ordinary rung of things. But the idea being that Trump is so unusual in himself and demonstrates um, when you see a movie and there's like a bomb goes off, some kind of super powerful bomb, and the whole screen sort of demonstrates this undulation, like you're underwater or something like that. So the actual situation, according to Zizek here, as represented by Trump, is so unusual that it's taken over the place of the parody. There's no parody as possible anymore. They're all just these. Alec Baldwin appears stiff and boring in comparison to as the representative of the almost of the Saturnalia, as the thing that's supposed to deviate from reality. Reality itself becomes so much inverted and so much a constant indefinable strangeness that the parody, by contrast, simply appears like the stultification of the Adam Smith example of the guy doing the same road action on a conveyor belt for decadal spans of time. So in this sense, what I wanted to get to is simply to something banal, but is just to say that I'm seeing quite a few angles in Heidegger, quite a few things that Heidegger is saying that for the longest time I didn't see. And I believe it has, in the simple sense, it feels like I come into more awareness that what Heidegger was saying was for himself straightforward. So like everyone says Heidegger is so abstruse, and some people say he's even a charlatan who's using terminology to hide the poverty of his ideas, or in some low way they accuse him of being it's people that think mysticism is pejorative, accuse him of being mystical and so forth. But it seems to me that in the sense that one can learn through the marathon of studying Heidegger to see what he's saying, that the simplicity of it is that for himself, he's saying things that are simple and self-evident. But so that has something to do. With the whole subject matter of Heidegger, which is that, for one thing, simply stated, that the things we're very used to, we take to be ultimate explanations of reality. So we're really used to understanding something some way. That's the bottom line. And then when we get there, that's the explanation. I was thinking of something in an example Zizek gave where he compares the Fukuyama time in the 1990s, in like say 1998 or so, where Fukuyama was saying all in this sort of third generation, as Derrida Derrida said when he heard the Fukuyama thing, he said, "I've already heard this in twice." Then when he was in college age by Kochev, the friend of Leo Strauss, and of course Hegel. So this end of history, but this end of history understood in the Fukuyama sense is sort of like the liberal American model has won out, and the Far East has some problems with like gay marriage or something, but other than that, eventually they're gonna come over to the emancipation of the American and French model or whatnot, or the however he has a specific understanding of the requirements of a democratic country according to his definition of democracy, let's say. But so in this sense, Zizek says, okay, here we have a position where there's a contraction in all the quote unquote ideologies. So ideology was originally, the term doesn't originate with Marx and Engels, but it was popularized by Marx and Engels as a word for all the things that got it wrong. And then, of course, for more than 100 years until Lukács, all the Marxists denied that Marxism itself had to be tried according to the standard of whether it were or not an ideology. It was assumed to be the truth. So, but in any case, if all ideologies are false pictures, attempts to picture reality, but false, and according to Marxism, false because of the upper classes want to reproduce themselves, and therefore, whether consciously or unconsciously, they produce these. In any case, whether they produce them or not, they make dominant. They make to be the supreme, and they bring to power the ideas that benefit them and reproduce them according to the Marxist view. So in this sense, when the Fukuyama view was coming in, what Zizek was saying is not that we would come to an end of ideology, but rather that the awareness that ideology exists would go away. So it would be like, in the sense that there's all kinds of unexamined opinions in the Platonic Socrates, right? So Socrates goes to the city of Delphos, and he talks to the Pythony there, and the famous greeting is know thyself, and this know thyself is then understood to mean be aware that you're naively in certain opinions which you simply never challenge. Now, of course, some people could say, we know these are opinions, but it's just that we really hate or detest everything else. So we're going to stick with our little, in a storm, any port will do. So we're going to stick with our view, and we're not going to even have a serious conversation with anyone else because we really hate them. We really detest their views and their way of life, etc. There could be that to an extent, but there's also this sense where certain things are taken for granted, and then therefore the philosophical doubt never comes in. In a certain way, in another parentheses, I'll say, in a certain way, the Cartesian certainty, as it were, goes against the grain of philosophy, right? Because philosophy, in its foundations, is a kind of doubt of, in the sense of this know thyself, which is know that you don't know what you know because you haven't proved it to yourself yet. So if you're in the work of proving something to yourself, then you can't be certain. But on the other hand, it never occurs to you to prove to yourself some view that you have because you count it as so normal. At the same time, then in a way, from the philosophical point of view, that's worse because it indicates less conscious. Maybe it's not worse. Maybe it's great. Maybe stupidity, which that would be, is simply more forcible, simply more mocked to it. It's more will. Yeah. But which is in a certain way the way Nietzsche's thinking pushes. If you look at it that way, you could say Heidegger is our defender against that kind of nihilism, against Nietzscheanism, against the power idea, against, let's put it this way, against the idea that, or the reality that stupidity is simply more powerful than intelligence. if intelligence goes along with the philosophers. Um, so, in this sense, Zizek is saying if the night where all cows are black, as it were, is the same as the day when there's only one ideology wins out. So the end of ideology would mean actually that one specific ideology won out, and everybody takes it so much for normal that they're in this state prior to when philosophy came into existence, like prior to when Socrates really agitated people and really made them see that they didn't quite know what they thought they knew. In this sense, so in other words, Zizek is saying far from the end of ideology, that would be the total ideological takeover of all human beings on the face of the planet. So in this sense, I think we get into some positions Heidegger is talking about in many of his texts where we don't see the connections there. So, but the thing, actually, the point that I wanted to get is, sorry if it's a little bit, I'll point for people that think that saying things that go into divagations and off-piste, as it were, off the track, and degenerate into foolishness. I've been made aware just today, as a matter of fact, of this very brilliant Isaac Asimov essay, which was apparently written at the time of the Los Alamos and the Manhattan Project, during the time when the nuclear weapon was being developed for World War II, which is called something like How to Be Creative, or What Creativity Is. It was an internal memo, so to speak, to his bosses at the Manhattan Project, explaining to them the benefit of having people who would allow their colleagues to talk nonsense, because this is the condition for allowing creativity to happen. He has a very trenchant analysis, which is quite aware of such things as that, that Newton and Leibniz came up with the calculus at the same time that this guy, he mentions the example of this, what's his name, Alfred Russell Wallace, who developed also, without knowledge of Darwin's theory, the theory of survival of the fittest. Well, survival of the fittest is the Spencer phrase, but that he developed this theory of evolution after, like Darwin, having spent a lot of time studying biology, and then, or how's it called then, natural history, and then coming across this Malthus essay on populations, and this gave the right metaphor for this really faulty, as one can show, is so far not. So that's the Heideggerian theme: is like, is the theory of this theory faulty because we can show that it's arbitrary, it's logically arbitrary, and it's arbitrary by a standard? Is the theory, because fitness, evolutionary fitness. I mean, it's arbitrary because it takes for granted the environment. Like, as there can always be an environment that makes any trait fit. Like, being an effete intellectual, or even in not to say a Stephen Hawking, who's he can't even take care of himself. In the 5th century BC or so would probably not be a good idea. Depend maybe if you were an Egyptian royalty, maybe, I don't know, but in the Stone Age, certainly, right? It wouldn't work out. But in the future age, we could see where maybe that would even, maybe only the mind will matter for